Following is an interview by Dub West with Maxie Gatlin, Gatlin, Maxey, Gatlin of Weber's Falls. The interview is made by Dub West.
This is an interview with Mr. Maxie Gatlin. Mr. Gatlin, how old are you?
I'm 85.
85. Well, you're a youngster in comparison to these other fellows I've been talking to then.
I'll be 86, my birthday,
And when will that be?
26th of this month.
Oh, well, it's almost here, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
How long have you lived in Weber's Falls?
Well, I've been in Muskogee County practically all my life. My father was a half-breed Indian,
I see.
and he left Indian Territory and went to Texas and married, and I was born close to Paris, Texas.
I see.
But I came back to Indian Territory when I was 3 years old. I've been here ever since in Muskogee County.
Well, that's something. You've seen a lot of things happen, haven't you?
Oh yeah, I sure have.
And the thing that's interesting to me is you've kept such a good scrapbook of everything that's happened.
Yeah, I've got all the important events that is published in the papers in that book in there for the last 35 years.
Well, that's something that we don't see very often, and of course, as I'm interested in history, well, that really interests me.
Yeah.
Incidentally, of course, your children might be interested in that, but I would like to suggest you give that to some museum sometime.
Well, my oldest daughter has already spoke for it.
Well,
She wants it.
Well, she deserves it. She ought to have it.
Yeah.
But sometimes the thing that happens with a thing like that is that sometimes children don't take an interest in it. Now, if they do, well, that's fine. But if they don't, why, it ought to go on where other people can see it.
Well, there's a number of people that's borrowed this book to look it over.
Well, it has a lot of interesting things in it. Your wife's maiden name?
Roma?
Roma.
Roma.
I see. And they were an old Weber's Falls family.
Yeah, she is born and raised right here in Weber's Falls.
Right
Never
in
lived nowhere else.
What was her first name?
Nora?
R-O-M-A-R?
Yeah, R-O-H-M-A-R.
R-O-H-M-A-R.
Yeah.
Now, you told me about some of her activities. Let's talk a little bit about her activities. For example, I see here a citation from the Pope.
Yeah.
What Pope was that?
It's Pope Paul.
Pope Paul.
Yeah.
And when was that?
Well, I don't.
I believe it tells here, July the 30th, 1955.
That was Pope Paul, wasn't it?
Yes. And she was very active in other community affairs, wasn't she?
Yeah, she's active in the club, the Home Demonstration Club.
I see.
She made trips around over the country with the club, taking active part as long as she was able.
And of course, she's very active in her church.
Yeah.
That's the reason she received this citation from Pope Paul.
Her and her sister, May Ross, Charlie Ross's wife, was, they almost built this church up here.
I see. So you and Charlie Ross are brothers-in-law.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Well, I hope to see Mr. Ross this afternoon. I have had a couple of nice visits with him, but I want to check him a little bit more, because I've got some more articles. By the way, I had a very interesting talk yesterday with Clint May. Is it Mays. He let me have a lot of the pictures that
He's
he
over
had.
at Haskell, isn't he?
No, he lives at Broken Arrow.
Oh, Broken Eye, yeah.
So he let me have a lot of the pictures that he had, that he had here in 1969.
Yeah.
Now let me just read some of this material, and you correct me. Now you stop me anytime there's anything you want to add or anything that's wrong. Will you do that?
Yeah.
Well, first, before we do that, you were a weather observer here how long?
Well, I was weather observer in my own right about 30 years.
About 30 years.
But I'd taken care of it for my brother. He was observer before I was. I'd taken care of it for him. He was working off at Camp Gruber and down at McAllister. I'd taken care of it for him for about 4 or 5 years. Really, I was observer here for almost 35 years.
Well, that's certainly something. According to the minutes of the First Baptist Church of Webbers Falls, the organization meeting was held March the 25th, 1882. By the way, when was the Catholic Church organized here? Or when did you first start having service to the Catholic Church?
I believe it is 1926.
1926.
Yeah.
I noticed in some of quite a number of, back during the Civil War, quite a number of the girls of the community went over to Fort Smith to school. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Did your girls go to Fort Smith to school?
Yeah.
Is that St. Anne's?
St. Anne's Academy and St. Scholastica, too. One of them went to St. Anne, and 2 of my daughters went to St. Scholastica.
I see. Now, as I remember it, you had 2 boys and 2 girls in the service during the war?
I had 1 boy.
1 boy.
And 2 girls.
2 girls.
And a son-in-law.
And a son-in-law. How many children do you have in all?
Well, we had 6.
Had 6.
Really, we had 8 children born, but one of them was born dead, died in infancy, and
You have 6 living now?
yeah. No, I have 5.
You have 5.
I had 1 died, stillborn,
I see.
and 1 died when he's just a small baby,
Just
about
an infant.
6 months old.
I see. Now, what is the given name? Any other of the boys or girls living around here besides Mrs. Hassler?
Yeah, Maxie Gatlin lives there in Muskogee, right?
And what is Mrs. Hassler's first name?
Patricia.
Patricia.
Yeah. Willie Patricia.
Okay, that gives me most of the information concerning your family.
My oldest son died in Houston about 3 years ago.
I see. And what was his name?
Frank. His family and all the children live down there, yes.
I see.
And I have 1 daughter that lives in Houston.
I see. R.E. Blackstone conducted a business in Weber's Falls in the 80s, as indicated by correspondence in the Grant Pullman collection, in which he is asking various attorneys for assistance in proving a local citizen innocent of introducing intoxicating liquor to the territory.
Well, I know there was a Blackstone was in business here.
That was before Blackstone and Hayes, wasn't it?
Yeah.
According to an account of Black Fox, were you any relation to Black Fox?
I don't reckon.
Well, now, well, it seems as though Charlie Charlie
Ross?
was some relation to him. Black Fox was a Hanks.
Yeah.
And did Charlie have any relatives that were Hanks?
No, he didn't have any relatives, only his wife.
I see. Well, if it
Black Fox that you were talking about was uncle of my wife.
well, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
He's so he was your wife's uncle.
Bob Hanks.
Bob Hanks, and also Charlie Ross's wife's uncle.
Yeah.
I see. According to an account of Black Fox in the Fort Smith elevator, there were 1,600 bales of cotton gin at Weber's Falls in 1887. He is quoted as follows: there have been 16, well, I won't go into that. J.E. McDaniel and his hotels. According to Carolyn Thomas Foreman in Oklahoma imprints, J.E. McDonald operated the Southern Hotel and the Travelers Home in Weber's Falls and the Mays Hotel at Illinois Station. It is stated that the houses were connected by a free hack line and everything was arranged for the accommodation of the public in both places.
Yeah.
Do you remember that hack?
Well, yeah, I remember about those hotels and about the hack. I rode on that hack many times.
I see. Now I'm listing the newspapers that I know about, and you see if there are any more. Weber's Falls had its share of newspapers, with the Indian Sentinel being established in 1890 by William Kennett as business manager and R.T. Hanks as editor.
I don't remember that.
Well, is R.T. Hanks Black Fox?
R.T. Hanks, yeah.
He's Black Fox. The Cataract was edited by J. McCarroll beginning in 1898. The Weber's Falls Monitor made its appearance in May of 1901, and the Weber's Falls Record, you probably remember this one.
I remember that.
Was begun in 1906 with Walter E. Head as editor and publisher.
I remember him. I knew him well.
I
Knew his
see.
family.
Largest transaction in Cherokee Nation. A correspondent to the Fort Smith elevator reported March 18th, 1892 that the largest transaction in the Cherokee Nation had been consummated with the purchase at Weber's Falls of the land, stock, and mercantile business of Blackstone and Hayes by Jesse Raymond and Fayette Clark for the sum of $300,000. That would have been a tidy sum in these days, and certainly was considered a large amount at the time of because of the power of the dollar. Now, this tells about the Cherokee payment. That's before your time.
Oh, no, I remember that.
Well, there was one in 94.
I remember that.
You do? All right. The July the 27th, 1894 issue of the Weekly Elevator of Fort Smith carried an account of the Cherokee payment being made Weber's Falls, in which the town was described as one of the best in the Cherokee Nation and alive with people. In fact, the woods surrounding the town were full of them. Lots of people here then.
Well, I wasn't here, but I remembered. I lived at Warner.
I see. It is reported that there were thousands of people there, fully as many as attended the Fort Gibson payment. Good order prevailed, and the collectors report reasonably good collection. Of course, what they do, those collectors come try to get any amount that the Indians owed them. On Sunday last, a fellow whose name we have been unable to learn let his gun go off accidentally, the load first killing a horse and then wounding one woman in the hand and another in the knee. Very little whiskey was sold during the payment. Several cases of pints and half pints were captured and destroyed by the officers. Now there was a Cherokee strip payment in 95 also. And then you remember the road show when they had that deal? One of the attractions during the Weber's Falls payment was the appearance of the Center Peyton comedy, which played to appreciative audiences. Wednesday night they played the Lightning Rod Agent, and the feature Saturday night was 10 Nights in the Barroom, which should be patronized especially by the young people, as there was an excellent lesson in the play. Now, do you remember J.O. Cobb and the trouble they had here about his property?
No, I don't remember that.
Mr. and Mrs. J.C. Buchanan.
Yeah, I remember them.
An account of the marriage of Mr. J.C. Buchanan and Miss Dallas Slaughter was given in the Fort Smith Weekly Elevator of May the 29th, 1896 as follows. The Reverend S.A. Evans officiated at the ceremony, and shortly afterward the happy couple left Weber's Falls for a bridal tour. Mr. Buchanan is one of the most prominent young men of Weber's Falls. He is a flourishing merchant and possesses the confidence of all who know him. His bride is an intelligent and charming young lady, a great favorite with a large circle of acquaintances. A daughter of this couple is Mrs. Joe Sheffield. Does she still live in Weber's Falls?
No, she's dead.
I see.
She's been dead a long time.
But J.B. Sheffield is a grandson.
Oh, J.B. Sheffield is a grandson
Of J.C. Buchanan.
yeah, J.B. and Dick,
J.B. and Dick.
Joe.
Any others?
Well, there's another one. They go by the name of Sugar. I can't think of his name.
I see. Well, I hope to see C.J.B. I've been chasing him for 2 or 3 days, but maybe I'll catch him sooner or later.
Well, you know why he's at down here.
Well, he's there sometime.
Yeah.
I just had them to call all over town, and they couldn't find him this morning, but they say he's around somewhere. Now, Mr. Buchanan was postmaster for a period of time. Is that right?
Yeah.
The town boys have been hilarious. The Talico Era of April the 6th, 1899, copied an item from the Weber's Falls Cataract saying, "Some of the town boys have been getting hilarious for the first few nights, and several houses are reported to have bullet holes in them as a result of the poor aim of the boys, who were evidently shooting at the man in the moon for some real or fancied insult offered them by the mythical gentleman." Did they shoot up things once in a while?
I don't remember that, of course. You see, I wasn't here in Weber's Falls till about 19 and 5.
I see.
We lived at Warner.
Well, now I need to find some material out for Warner. You may be able to tell me some things about it. Who were the early storekeepers at Warner?
Well,
you don't happen to have a picture of Camel Russell, do you?
I believe there's one in that scrapbook somewhere.
Well, I don't. I sure would like to. I haven't been able to find a picture of Camel Russell except one where he is fishing in the streets of Muskogee.
Yeah. Well, I believe I have one of them.
Well, I have a picture of that, but I'd like a picture that shows his face pretty good, if possible.
No, I don't think I have one.
Who were some other early people in Warner besides Camel Russell? Of course, it's Russell at that time.
Yeah. Well, there's old man Newt Wickett.
All right.
Bob West.
Was he of the West that was the Indian police?
Yeah.
He was the Indian police? Now, is he any relation to Irvin West? Was Irvin West his son or grandson over in Shakota? And
Well, I don't know.
well, Irvin West was from around Warner, so might be the same one.
Well, there's a bunch of Kerrs that lived around Warner.
Kerr.
Yeah. No. KWR, Kerr.
All right. You remember anybody who the first school teachers or first postmaster, doctors?
No, I don't.
If you think of anything else about Warner, why I need material on Warner because I don't find very much on him, on Warner. All right, I've got some here on Robert Ross. I'll let Charlie see whether that's right or not.
Yeah.
And now this is about John Henry Effort. According to a story by Black Fox in the Muskogee Phoenix dated October the 1st, 1911, John Henry Effort was a pioneer of Weber's Falls. That's 1914. He celebrated his 100th birthday on that day.
Yeah.
Mr. Newt Riley recalls a party given Mr. Effort. Not only did the community give him a birthday present of $1 for each year he had lived, but they had an old-fashioned barn raising for him, and Mr. Riley remembers Mr. Effort climbing the ladder as if he were taking some shakes or rough-hewn shingles to the roof.
Yeah.
You remember that, don't you?
That's there.
Mr. Effort came to Weber's Falls in 1869. The article stated that he had been alive during the administration of all the presidents up to that time with the exception of the first three. He tried his luck in the gold fields of California without success and fought in the Civil War. He made a trip on horseback in 1850 over the same route as a Trail of Tears, a distance of 800 miles, and found the grave of Nancy Bushyhead, the sister of Chief Bushyhead. During his visit in Indian Territory, he was the guest of Major George Lowry. Perry Brewer, the father of O.H.P. Brewer. Perry Brewer, the father of O.H.P. Brewer, was one of the early merchants of Weber's Falls. Mrs. Brewer taught school for a period at Weber's Falls and later on Greenleaf Mountain. O.H.P. Brewer was educated in the Cherokee Male Missionary Seminary in Tahlequah and the University of Arkansas. He was president of the Cherokee Board of Education, as well as his father before him, was senator to the Cherokee legislature, a member of the Constitution Convention, postmaster of Muskogee Post Office, and county judge of Muskogee County. Now, is all that correct as far as you know?
All that is correct.
Now, I noticed that the first school building that was built here after, might say the first school building after they had public schools, was named Brewer Academy. Was that named for his mother or not?
Well, I don't know whether it's named for his mother or him.
I see. It's named for the Brewers, though.
Yeah, it's named for the Brewers.
I see. Well, I noticed from the picture that Mr. Mays had over, that he let me have, it said it is Brewer Academy.
Yeah.
Doctors in Weber's Falls. The first, according to Charlie Ross, the first doctor in Weber's Falls was Dr. Harrison. Is that you right, so far as you know?
Well, I don't know whether he was the first or not, but there was a Dr. Harrison here, I know.
He was followed by Dr. Burke, whose daughter lives in Muskogee.
Yeah.
And do you know his daughter's name?
Let's see, I don't know which one it is.
Charlie might remember it.
Well, I don't remember.
Dr. Gaines was an early doctor. And Newt Riley tells us of a Dr. Thorne. You remember Dr. Thorne too?
No, I don't.
Dr. Thomas, who passed away in January of 1970, is remembered by present-day residents of Weber's. He began practicing here in, you know, about when Dr. Thomas came here?
1809. 1909.
His widow now lives in, where does his widow live?
Lives here.
She lives here?
Yeah.
Well, I thought she'd moved away.
Well, she may have. I heard she was going to, but I don't know for sure whether she's gone or not.
I see. Weber's Falls Bank, the First National Bank, was the first one organized with Mr. McCauley as president and Ed Shackelford as cashier.
Yeah.
That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah.
Joe Sheffield worked in it.
Yeah. That's right.
The First State Bank was operated by Bill and Marion Gibson.
Yeah.
And I noticed in the picture that they had it was sort of a cutout of the Gibson Brothers store.
Yeah, it was.
And then, according to Mr. Mays, when it went out of business, a Roland drugstore was put in there.
Yeah.
And I believe Roland was a brother-in-law of one of the Gibsons.
Yeah.
Or I believe father-in-law of one of the Gibsons.
Father-in-law Bill Gibson.
I see. John Brown and his son Jack. I got a nice little deal from Jack. You know, John Brown was a member of the Indian Police,
Yeah.
serving during the judgeship of Judge Parker. Laddie Ogden of Texana remembers Mr. Brown and tells several interesting stories about this pioneer lawman. His son Jack Brown is one of the students as well as a teacher at the Cherokee Male Seminary. He was superintendent of Sequoia Vocational Training School for many years and is still living in Tahlequah. The Bodart tree. There's very little doubt that the famous Bodart tree of Weber's Falls was a good-sized one when Walter Weber established the little trading post. It measures 29 feet in circumference and is considered the world's largest. It is often referred to as a hanging tree, but no one remembers an actual hanging.
No, I don't think there was anybody hanging.
The fire of 1911. A disastrous fire struck Weber's Falls in March the 11th, 1911. Charlie Ross says he was working in Oscar Hayes' store at the time, general merchandise store, and went upstairs to get an item, looked out the window, and the entire town was burning. In fact, all the business houses except the Hayes store and a hotel were destroyed in the disastrous fire. Rose Coppinger, heroine of the fire, a 19-year-old telephone operator, Rose Edith Coppinger, and I have her picture and the pictures of the fire that Rose King gave me there in Tahlequah, there in Muskogee, was the heroine of the fire of 1911. An account of her act of heroism was given in her obituary when she passed away October the 17th, 1966, as follows. During the fire which burned down most of the town of Weber's Falls, March the 11th, 1911, Rose Coppinger, the 19-year-old telephone operator, stayed at her switchboard notifying residents of the danger until she was carried from the burning building in a wet blanket. For her courageous action, the town of Weber's Falls petitioned and won for her a Carnegie Medal for heroism and collected a cash purse of $500. The Pioneer Telephone and Telegraph Company awarded her $75 to reimburse her for the loss of her belongings. Rebuilding at once. A headline in the Times Democrat of March the 13th, 1911 had the following: Weber's Falls burns, will rebuild at once. It stated that the businessmen met at Hayes Mercantile the night after the fire and decided to rebuild, wiring for tents to do business in until the town could be rebuilt. Surveyors began Monday morning making a new survey of the town, laying it out as it now is, with the main street leading to the Arkansas River. Before the fire, the principal streets ran north and south and were more or less in the form of a square.
Yeah.
I understand since that they might have been sort of in the form of an N. Was a square more accurate or an N?
Well, it is a square.
It is a square.
Yeah.
The article related the fact that the fire started from a spark on the roof of the pool hall.
No, it didn't. It started on the inside.
It started on the inside of the pool hall. Well, that's what I've heard people say that.
In trash in the back of the pool hall.
All right. Okay. It mentioned that the Hayes Brothers gin near the river burned, making the fourth gin that had burned on that site. I have a picture of that old gin that Mr. Mays gave me, and I'll run it in the paper. It shows the gin before it's burned. Shows a water tower there on that where the speaker stand is now. You know, the speaker stand down there is where the water tower used to be.
Well, that used to be a bandstand there.
Well,
Weber's Falls used to have a band, and that is a bandstand.
Well, it was a bandstand. Now it's a speaker stand.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. Among the business houses that burned were Blackstone and Hayes, Gibson Brothers, First National Bank, the First State Bank, McCorkle Drug, Star Meat Market, Palace Drug, Pollard's Cash Store, the KP Hall, Weber's Falls Record, Weber's Falls Inn, 2 barber shops, 2 restaurants, 2 pool halls, half a dozen joints and smaller buildings. The article went on. As soon as the fire started, both banks put all their money and valuable papers in the vaults, locked the doors, and let the buildings burn. Continuing, the desperate fight to save the Hayes Mercantile saved the residence portion of the town. Next to the store is a hotel and half a mile of residences. Had the store burned, all the residents would have probably burned, as there was a 35-mile wind blowing toward the houses. A railroad. Weber's Falls obtaining a railroad was a big event. The day following the fire, it was announced that material had been bought to make it a reality. It was put in by C.N. Haskell, Oscar Hayes, and Frank Vore, and according to Charlie Ross, was brought from a mining or logging company in Texas. Newt Riley furnished 2 spans of mules to work on the roadbed. The big affair of the completion of the railroad and the celebration was announced in the Times-Democrat of October the 3rd, 1911, with the following headline: "Take day off and celebrate with Weber's Falls tomorrow." The line was called the Weber's Falls Western and ran from Warner to Weber's Falls.
Yeah.
It lasted a little less than 3 years, according to Mr. Riley. Maxie Gatlin says that
Squire, and it didn't burn.
Oh, the McCorkle drugstore did not burn.
Did not burn.
I see. Well,
It and Satterwhite's butcher shop.
Satterwhite Butcher Shop. Now, Mr. Satterwhite was the father of Mrs. Swearingen.
Yeah.
I see. They called him Pet or P.C. Satterwhite.
Pat
Satterwhite.
Pat Satterwhite.
P.E.T.
P.E.T.
I see.
No, they didn't burn.
They didn't burn.
No.
All right. Now, incidentally, I noticed there's Mr. Mays had a picture of what I used to call a doodle bug, of just a one engine that carried freight and so on and passengers.
Yeah.
Then also, Newt Riley and Mr. Mays says that M.J. Maples had a car, a Chambers car that he put on the tracks and ran.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah, I remember.
I see. Mr. and Mrs. Maxie Gatlin. Mr. and Mrs. Maxie Gatlin were among the pioneer citizens of Weber's Falls. Mr. Gatlin was a weather observer for 35 years and has kept a scrapbook of all the happenings, not only of Weber's Falls, but also of Muskogee County in the state of Oklahoma. He is one of the most interesting persons it has been my pleasure to interview. He recalls loading corn and alfalfa hay on the Mary D in 1906. He was a witness to the disastrous fire as well as many other happenings in Weber's Falls. Mrs. Gatlin, who passed away, when did she pass away?
In 1967.
Was one of the most active workers community workers in Weber's Falls. She was also very active in the Catholic Church, receiving a citation personally from Pope Paul. The Gatlins had one son, I put two sons and two daughters, one son, two daughters, and a son-in-law. Who were participants in World War II. Then I say that Mrs. Joe Hassel lives in Muskogee, but I'll also put your other daughter that lives in Muskogee. Newt Riley. One of Weber's Falls' most interesting persons is Newt Riley, 96 years young. His memory is unusually good, and it was a pleasure to chat with him. He first came to Weber's Falls in 1898, staying a year before returning to Illinois. He made his home here permanently in 1905 and has been identified with many of the activities of the community. He furnished items. He furnished teams for the building of the railroad, witnessed the fire of 1911, had the usual experiences of a farmer in the early days, worked on the building of the bridge across the Arkansas, recalled the fire of 1938. Now, at 38, you had the other fire, wasn't it?
1930. Yeah.
And the flood of 43. Now, did you have much flood in 57 when Muskogee had a pretty bad flood?
No, it wasn't too bad.
Wasn't too bad.
No.
As well as the building of the new bridge and the new lease on life that has been noticeable during the past few months. He works in his garden when the weather permits, and it is a garden of considerable size. The bridge over the Arkansas. The 1922 brought a new outlook to Weber's Falls. The bridge across the Arkansas was completed. This meant a better link to the rest of the world. The railroad had not been successful, and the river traffic had come to a standstill. So the bridge not only bridged the river, but it bridged a gap that was badly needed. Yeah. Incidentally, Charlie Summers had the distinction of working on this bridge in its erection, as well as in its demolition to make way for the new bridge in 1971, and to permit the traffic on the McClellan-Purr waterway. Now, I understand that Charlie Summers also had...
No, that's not Charlie Summers, it's Charlie Thomas.
Thomas?
Charlie Thomas.
Oh, well, then...
Charlie Summers
ran the
ferry.
Ran the ferry.
Yeah.
All right, well, now that's what I couldn't understand. That's Charlie Thomas.
He lives over at Gore now.
But Charlie Summers doesn't.
Oh, Charlie Summers dead.
So I'm looking for Charlie Thomas instead of Charlie Summers.
Yeah.
I've been looking for Charlie Summers.
No, it's Charlie Thomas.
All right. Now here's an article that came out of the paper. An article appeared in the Time Democrat dated November the 8th, 1922, with this caption: Historic ferry to pass out with opening of County's free bridge at Weber's Falls. The article went as follows. In the south end of Muskogee County is being enacted one of the bitter tragedies of super civilization. The new free bridge across the Arkansas River between Weber's Falls and Gore is to be opened soon. Then there will embark on the last long crossing to oblivion a weather-beaten ferry boat, manned by a crew equally weather-beaten as the old scow that has served the traveling generation so faithfully through many years. The opening of the bridge means a passing of the Summers ferry. Whether on the steam-propelled Esther or the lighter current-operated boat, the ferrymen are putting travelers across now, almost in the very shadow of the gaunt rim spans that so soon will spell the doom of the two old boats and of a profitable business. Now, Mrs. Hayes is going to give me some information on her store. I talked to her over the telephone, and she went to Blytheville, Arkansas this week, but she'll talk to me early next week. They say she came here, of course, at first, they were over at Gore, and he and her brother-in-law, their brother-in-law, John King?
Yeah.
I'll put the story in here, and after a couple of years, Mr. King health failed, so Hayes then bought him out and went ahead and with the business. Now I have George S. and Curtis W. Mays. As a result of being a photographer on the side, George S. Mays has, through his son Curtis W. Mays, given us some of the best pictures of early Weber's Falls. He worked for the Hayes Mercantile and its successor, Brady Mercantile, for more than 40 years, and did his photography at night and on weekends with his wife helping him on the side. She did a great deal of the printing. Curtis tells us that they darkened the living room with shades, using red wrapping paper around the kerosene light as a darkroom light. She exposed the film by holding it outside the shade and exposing it to the daylight while she counted off the required time. Curtis Mays recalled the fact that his father was quite a storyteller, getting his yarns from the drummers that came into the store. Curtis remembers his primary teacher, Miss Lily Wilkerson, as well as her sister, Miss Lena, daughters of Uncle Bob Wilkerson. The elder Mays came to Weber's Falls from Mays County, named for his cousin, Chief Mays. Curtis was a witness to the holdup of the Weber's Falls Bank when H.B. Egan of Muskogee was held as a hostage. Then Dr. L.S. McAllister of Muskogee was born in what is generally referred to as the Sevier home. Is that right? Was this place there where the Bodark tree, is that called the Sevier home?
Yeah. He was born there.
The site of the famous Bodark tree. His father, you remember his father's initials?
Oh, for goodness sakes, I can't. I've known him for years and years.
It's J something. J.W.?
I don't know. Dr. McAllister's name is L.S.
L.S., which is for Lawrence Sevier.
Yeah.
Sevier is his middle name because his mother was a Sevier.
Yeah.
Do you remember his mother's maiden name?
Dr. McAllister?
Dr. McAllister's mother's maiden name.
Sevier.
I mean her given name.
Her given name?
Yes.
No, I don't remember her given name, but she was a Sevier.
A Sevier. Well, what was her father's name?
Well, I don't remember.
Mm-hmm. Oh, her name was Sudie, I believe. Wasn't her name Sudie?
Yeah, Susie.
Susie, S-U-S-I-E.
Yeah.
Now, do you have anything to add to that or to correct me on?
Well, there's something I want to correct you on there. Oh, the Wilkerson girls that you mentioned, Lily and Lena,
Yeah.
was not Bob Wilkerson. Oh,
what? All right.
They was daughters of Whit Wilkerson.
Who?
Whit
All
Wilkerson.
right. Okay. Anything else?
Well, I can't think of anything.
Well, if you think of anything else, maybe I can see you again before all these come out. I've got enough here that'll probably take 2 or 3 articles to come out. I have one coming this week on Purim,
Yeah.
and then next week probably there'll be one on Weber's Falls, next week or 2. So if you think of anything that we haven't covered, why, try to remember it, and maybe I can see you again before they actually come out. Now, do you remember about the time about when the Methodist Church started here? About the time it started?
No, I don't.
The school, as I understand it, the depot was about where Ross Sheffield is, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
Back in the real early days, there was a salt well. They had some salt works west of town here. I don't suppose there's anybody of modern times remember anything about those, do they?
I don't.
Now they refer to Illinois Station. That was on the other side of Gore. That's where the Illinois River came into the Arkansas. Was that Gore in the early days?
That's Gore.
That was Gore itself.
In the early days, Gore was Illinois Station and Camel Post Office. And when statehood come, they named the town after Senator Gore. And it's the whole thing, the post office and the town is all called Gore. It has been ever since.
Now, who would you recommend I see over at Gore about early Gore? I saw Mr. Rogers, but he didn't remember much.
Well, I don't know just who.
Now it was Camel was a Dr. Camel there in the early days. Is that right?
Yeah.
They say Mr. Eichlin, that Waldo Eichlin might tell me. Dr. Eichlin was a fairly early man.
Yeah. I remember Dr. Acklin well.
And of course, I understand Waldo's son that teaches over in Connors is doing some work on the history of Gore. So that probably will give him some information.
Yeah.
Well, I've enjoyed chatting with you, and if you think of anything else at all, why, I'd like to be sure to have everything as complete as possible. So.
Well,
I'll try to see you again in the next week or two.
well, you're going to put this in a paper.
This will be in the county news.
In the county news.
This little county news that comes here.
It won't be in the Phoenix, then.
It won't. This won't be in the Phoenix. It's too long for Phoenix. However, I think eventually I will put out a book of all these little towns: Weber's Falls, Coram, Warner, Gore, Haskell, Coweta, and try to include all the early information about all the little towns around Muskogee in one deal. But the article this article will probably come out in the Muskogee and what's called the county news, which is printed at Weber's Falls.
Well, if you put all the pictures and the items in the county news, it'll have to be a whole lot bigger than it usually is.
Well, what'll happen, it'll be on several issues, you see. I've already had one on early Weber's Falls, back when the Rich Van and Boer and such as that. But I'll probably, the material I just read will probably take about 3 issues of the county news. I have some more articles coming out about Muskogee. One probably will come out in the morning. But I can't get enough time or enough space in the Muskogee paper to have all these little towns too. So I'm doing that through the county newspaper. I didn't show you the pictures of the fire, did I? Miss King, the daughter of the telephone operator, and here's a picture of the telephone operator.
Mm-hmm.
And here are pictures of the fire.
Yeah.
remember this, I bet you.
Yeah.
She thinks her father drove that hack. Do you know? Mr. King? She's not sure. Yeah, we just about. Your father. Let's just recall just a few things that we've been talking about, Mr. Ross. Let's see. When were you born? When were you born?
When?
Yes.
March 24th, 1892.
1892, right across the road here.
Yeah, back there about a half mile.
Then you just had one brother, Cotton?
No, I had a half brother.
You had a half brother.
Yeah. Papa been married twice.
I see. And then your son is Charles. What children do you have?
Huh?
What children do you have?
Me?
Yes.
I have 5.
I see.
Yeah.
Will you call them?
Yeah. Charlie Romo, Ross, oldest one. May Ross Lincoln, the girl.
Does she live in Oklahoma City?
She lives in Oklahoma City. And Frank Ross, Frank A. Ross, he lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And Joe Ross lives in Tucson,
I see.
Arizona. And Charlotte, the baby girl, lives at Broken Arrow.
I see.
And she is secretary of the city manager at Broken Arrow.
Oh yeah.
Charlotte is, yeah.
It's her son that's rodeoing quite a bit, is it?
Yeah, the children are.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that boy had won quite a little money last time I talked to her this year so far. About 3,000 up to.
The only one living in Weber's Fault is Charles Jr.
Yeah, he lives right down there.
I see.
He's not Junior.
It's not Junior. Charles.
Charles R.
Charles R. I see.
Mine's CF, see.
Yes. Charles F.
And I sign my name out here, CF, all the time. Almost everybody knows that, but they get her mail mixed up. See?
Uh-huh.
And I named him after my wife's people, her father, Roma. Here, her name was Roma.
I see. They were old timers here.
Oh, yeah, she was a Hanks. Miss Roma was a Hanks.
I see. Now, that made Black Fox was a Hanks, wasn't he?
Black Fox was a Hanks, and he was a brother to Miss Roma's daddy.
I see.
And Black Fox was the daddy of Robbie Smith. That Robbie Smith lives this side of the phone, that big two-story house on the left, going in.
Oh, I see.
That was her, and Grandpa Effort's wife. We call her Aunt Peggy.
I see.
And she's a sister to those boys. I'm pretty sure that's right.
Do you remember the occasion of the 100th birthday of Grandpa Effort?
Oh yes, yeah, I was there.
You were there.
Yeah.
They gave him 100 silver dollars, I understand.
Well, I don't know whether it's $100 silver dollars or not. I don't think it was $100 silver dollars. It could have been, but they gave him $100 for every year he was old.
That's what I understood.
And they did that every year till he died, or we did it rather.
How old was he when he died?
And I believe he's 103.
I see. I have a picture of him on his 100th birthday.
Yeah.
Then I have this picture that was taken of him with the school children. See, here he is with the school children.
Yeah, that's him. Yeah.
Now here's the school building. They call that
The Brewer Academy.
the Brewer Academy. Was it named for Perry Brewer or Mrs. Brewer, or both of them?
Named after Chute, I guess. Chute Brewer.
And well,
That's Judge Brewer.
that's Judge Brewer, OHP. Well, now wasn't it before his time practically? Wasn't he just a boy?
Oh heck no! I remember real well when that was built.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that. It don't say when it's built,
No, I don't know when it was built.
but after we.
It was in the picture of when they had the station,
When they had what?
the railway station,
Oh, yeah.
1911.
Yeah, it was built right along about that time, a little before that time. They had
It
school.
was built probably when they started schools right after the turn of the century.
Yeah. Now they had a school. You know where that building is, don't you?
Yes, sir.
Or east of that, about 2 blocks. Had a big 2-story building, frame building. Had a Masonic Hall on top, and the schools below.
Uh-huh.
And then they built this. That building, that Brewer Academy. That is just 8th grade.
Yes.
This was then.
Now here's a picture. Here's a picture of the gin back before it burned. See here's the water tower, which later I understand was they had a speaker stand, a band stand there, and then the speaker stands there now
Yeah.
down the park.
Yeah. That's been built a long time, been worked over several times.
Oh yeah.
Now this is that old Hayes Mercantile store.
Yes, sir.
That's Oscar Hayes on that
That's
store I
Oscar
told
Hayes.
about. That's the
Yeah.
Oscar Hayes store. Yeah. And that was the only store building that didn't burn in the fire.
Now that's what I understood.
Yeah, that's right. And
And that was on the north side of the street, I understand.
yeah.
And that little old cafe is the east end of it. Curtis Mays says that is the east wall of that mercantile company.
Well,
You know that little cafe there next to the post office?
yeah.
He says that it went on west from there. That was the east wall, east end of that mercantile company. They left
Oh,
that
no,
wall.
It didn't go that far.
It didn't go that far?
Oh no. You know where that laundry is down there?
Yeah.
Well, my son owned
Where
that
he
laundry,
is?
see.
Uh-huh.
That went to there, just about that building right there from the river back this way.
Oh, I see.
And George Pollard, I said Pollard had a store there, didn't I?
Yeah.
George Pollard had a home right in there. And Mr. Rowland, Frank Rowland, had a big 2-story house in there too, before they got to the corner. And the corner was, Mr. Rowland built that for his drugstore.
Oh, I see. Now the drugstore after the fire part of the time was there before the fire. Wasn't it in with the bank where the bank used to be? So
No, that is after the fire.
that is after the fire?
I believe this now. That town is not like it was.
No. Yes, we realize that.
Well, there was a big drugstore out in the middle of the street. In other words, Hayes Mercantile Store and that bunch of stuff in there was the end of the street, and there was a street went around. And then there was a big wooden structured drugstore. And then Satellite and Thomas had meat markets there. And then there was a street through there and a George Farlow building there, and there's a bunch of old buildings there. Had a telephone office in there. And Maple run his hotel down there close, see?
Who?
Maples.
Maple.
M.J. Maples.
M.J. Maple.
Yeah.
He was quite a promoter, I understand.
I don't think that. Sold sewing machines and.
Who was that? That house is still standing, I understand.
Yeah, that's the house I'm talking about.
Miss Smith's house?
Yeah.
They say she might know quite a bit about early
I don't
times.
think she would. She's hard of hearing.
She is hard of hearing?
She's not as old as I am.
Oh, sure not.
I used to go with her a little bit.
A little
Not
bit.
much, but she is related to me.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's that nice house.
Here's the potato wagon.
Yeah, it's going down to the river. Yeah. They used to fight. I hear the wagon out of line right there. They used to fight for place.
Uh-huh.
And I've seen them stacked up to come up to that bank from the river, and it went kind of ungodly enough through there. I've seen wagons stacked plumb back there,
Never.
trying to get on that boat.
Oh,
All 2 or 3 at a time, too, I believe.
yeah. Boy, they had to wait a long time, didn't they?
Yeah.
That's the way they carried the cotton in those days too, huh?
Yeah.
That ferry was pretty busy.
Oh, yeah.
Here's the engine, the
Yeah.
train. Oh, we got-
Weber's Falls, Shawnee, and Western.
Is
That's
that-
what they called it.
I thought it was Weber's Falls at Western. Weber's Falls, Shawnee, and Western.
That's where they're going to build it, to Shawnee, and
Never
then they're
did-
going west. See?
Never did go any further than Warner.
Warner, no. I'm trying to see who that is.
That's supposed to be
there.
a McCorkle boy.
Did Clint say it was?
He thought he was.
They didn't wear white shirts. That's not McCorkle.
That's where they cut the ice. It flows over about in 15, and they tried to keep the ice cut out and floated out so the ferry could go across. Said it still flows over some, so they just drove the teams over it.
Well, I drove across there for tea.
You have.
Yeah.
Then here's the doodlebug.
Yeah, that's it.
Now they had a car on that too for a while, didn't they?
Yeah, the funny that car there. Old Maples, he decided he could make a little money, and he bought him one of them cars and put it on that
Yeah,
track, see?
That's what I understood.
And then the railroad company, they didn't want to see Maples making money, so they put one on.
Uh-huh.
And old Maples saw him a-coming, they had a head-in collision. He
Oh.
run into him. He was mad because they put that on, see?
They're very
Yeah, just about a wire. Well, had a wire there. Fire. Had a funny. Funny old time.
Now, do you, Mays told me about back when they built the bridge in 22, that they didn't have the approach fixed, so they built a wooden ramp up it, and that Floyd Roselle and his boys started up it, and the team balked at it, and it went over the side of the ramp. Do you know anything about that?
I don't think he's right about who was driving the team or whose team it was, but I saw that.
You did. Well, now,
They put that up there, now understand, they built that wooden approach so they could haul potatoes over.
uh-huh.
And that team went up there and they shied, you know how they
Yeah.
do, shied, and one of the mules fell off,
Uh-huh.
and the other stayed up on tops.
I see.
The harness and stuff held him, you see. He had his brace like this. The wagon never did go off,
Oh, he did.
so I saw that.
Well, did he dump the potatoes and the boy and the man off?
No.
Well, he thought he did. Well, I better not tell that story then.
No, I think somebody might contradict it. see.
Yeah, well,
I'm pretty sure that's not right. I saw it. But as well as I remember now, That was McGrew's team that went over there, as well as I remember, big fan of black news.
Now, if you'll listen, I'm going to read this article.
All right.
And if you want to stop me, if there's anything that's wrong or you want to add to it, you stop me.